You ever notice how the loudest people in the room are rarely the strongest? They're shouting because they need you to believe in them. They're performing because without an audience, they're not sure they exist at all. But then there are the others, the quiet ones, the ones who don't need to announce their arrival or justify their departure. They move through the world with a kind of gravity that has nothing to do with force and everything to do with presence. And if you've ever met one of these people, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They don't demand your attention, but somehow they have it anyway. We live in a world that worships the loud, the bold, the aggressive, the self-promoter. We're told that if you're not broadcasting your every achievement, your every thought, your every move, then you're invisible. You're irrelevant. We've built an entire civilization around the idea that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, that the early bird gets the worm, that fortune favors the bold. But what if we've got it backwards? What if the real power, the real strength, the real wisdom isn't found in the noise at all? What if it's been hiding in plain sight, in the silence we've been taught to fear? Here's what nobody tells you. Walking your own path is terrifying. Not because it's dangerous, but because it's lonely. When you step off the well-worn road that everyone else is traveling, when you refuse to follow the map that society handed you at birth, you're not just choosing a different route. You're choosing to go it alone. And that's the price. That's always been the price. Let's talk about what we're really afraid of. Because it's not actually being alone, is it? You can be alone in your bedroom and feel perfectly fine. What we're afraid of is being unseen, unvalidated, unconfirmed in our existence by the crowd. From the moment you could understand language, you were being programmed. Sit still, follow the rules, color inside the lines. Don't be different. Don't stand out. Well, stand out, but only in the ways we approve of. Be yourself, but make sure yourself is someone we can understand, categorize, and control. And so you learned the dance. You learned what faces to make, what words to say, what dreams to have. You learned that belonging required a price, and that price was authenticity. You put on the mask, not because you're fake, but because you're human. Because the alternative, being truly seen, truly known, truly yourself in a world that rewards conformity, felt like choosing exile. I watch people every day performing elaborate rituals of normalcy. They're exhausted. They're spending their precious life energy maintaining an image, playing a role, pretending to want things they don't actually want, pretending to be someone they're not. And for what? For the approval of people who are doing the exact same thing? For the comfort of fitting in with a crowd that's equally lost? The irony is suffocating. We're all pretending in order to belong to a group of pretenders. We're all hiding our true selves to gain the acceptance of people who are hiding their true selves. It's like a conspiracy of inauthenticity, and everyone's in on it, except the few who dare to opt out. And those who opt out, we call them weird, strange, difficult, antisocial. We create an entire vocabulary to pathologize independence, to make outcasts of those who refuse to participate in the collective delusion. Because if they can be happy without the mask, without the performance, without the approval, then what does that say about the rest of us? What does that say about the lives we've built on foundations of fear and conformity? Here's what's really happening. Most people aren't living their lives. They're living a script someone else wrote. They're following directions to a destination they never chose. They wake up one day at 40, 50, 60, and realize they've been climbing a ladder that's leaning against the wrong wall. They've been winning a game they never wanted to play. They've been seeking approval from judges they don't even respect. And by then, the fear is even greater, because now they've invested decades into this performance. Now they've built an entire identity around who they're pretending to be. Now the cost of authenticity feels impossibly high. The sunk cost fallacy isn't just an economic principle. It's a life sentence for those who discover too late that they've been living someone else's dream. But let me tell you something about those who walk their own path. Something you need to understand if you're considering joining them. They're not special. They're not chosen. They're not blessed with some supernatural courage that the rest of us lack. They simply reached a point where the pain of staying the same exceeded the fear of change. That's it. That's the whole secret. There comes a moment, usually in the dark of night, when all the distractions are gone and you're alone with yourself, when you realize you can't do it anymore. You can't pretend. You can't perform. You can't maintain the fiction. Not because you're brave, but because you're tired, exhausted, depleted from the effort of being someone you're not. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can double down on the performance, convince yourself it's worth it, swallow another pill to numb the dissonance, or you can surrender. Not surrender to defeat, but surrender to truth, to reality, to what is, rather than what you think should be. This is where the path begins. Not with a grand gesture or a dramatic announcement. Not with a social media post declaring your independence or a manifesto explaining your philosophy. It begins quietly, privately, with a simple decision to stop lying, first to yourself, then gradually to everyone else. Now here's where it gets interesting. The people around you won't understand. They can't. Because to understand would require them to question their own performance, their own mask, their own cage. And most people aren't ready for that. So they'll interpret your authenticity as judgment, your independence as rejection, your peace as arrogance. They'll ask you what's wrong. They'll tell you you've changed. They'll worry about you, not because you're in danger, but because you're demonstrating that there's another way. And that's threatening. That's terrifying. Because if you can be happy without their approval, without the game, without the performance, then maybe they've been wasting their lives. Maybe the emperor has no clothes. Maybe the whole thing's a house of cards. The quiet strength of walking your own path isn't about being tough or invulnerable. It's about being grounded, centered, present in your own skin in a way that most people never experience. It's about knowing who you are when no one's watching, about being the same person in private that you are in public, about having nothing to hide and nothing to prove. You see, the great paradox of the independent path is that it looks selfish from the outside, but it's actually the most generous thing you can do, because when you stop performing, you stop demanding that others perform. When you accept yourself, you create space for others to be themselves. When you walk your own path, you give others permission to find theirs. The crowd is held together by mutual fear and mutual performance. But genuine community, real connection, authentic relationship, these things can only happen between people who know themselves, between people who've done the work of stripping away the pretense and meeting each other as they actually are. Not as they wish they were, not as they think they should be, but as they are. And this is rare, painfully rare, because it requires vulnerability of a depth that most people are unwilling to risk. It requires standing naked, metaphorically speaking, in front of another human being and saying, "This is me, flawed, uncertain, struggling, real," and trusting that maybe, just maybe, you'll be met with the same honesty in return, The quiet strength isn't silence. It's not withdrawal or isolation or misanthropy. It's the ability to be fully present without needing to control how others perceive you. It's the freedom that comes from knowing that your worth isn't determined by consensus. Your value isn't subject to vote. Your existence doesn't require validation from the crowd. Let me tell you what happens when you truly commit to your own path. Not what you think will happen. Not the fantasy version. The reality. First, you'll lose people. Not everyone, but some. The relationships that were built on mutual pretense will dissolve. The friendships that required you to be someone you're not will fade. And this will hurt. Not because you need those people, but because loss hurts even when it's necessary, even when it's healthy, even when it's exactly what needs to happen. But here's what else happens. The relationships that remain will deepen, will transform, will become real in a way they never were before. Because now you're not connecting mask to mask. You're connecting human to human, soul to soul, truth to truth. And that kind of connection, once you've experienced it, makes all the superficial socializing you used to do feel like playing house. You'll also discover that you have more energy. So much more energy. Because pretending is exhausting. Maintaining a false self is like carrying a second person on your back everywhere you go. When you put that person down, when you stop performing, you suddenly have access to resources you forgot you had. Creativity, curiosity, joy. These things return because they're not being crushed under the weight of pretense anymore. You'll sleep better. I'm not exaggerating. When you're living in alignment with your truth, when there's no gap between who you are and who you're pretending to be, your nervous system relaxes. The constant low-grade anxiety that you thought was just part of being human starts to dissolve, because that anxiety was never about the world being dangerous. It was about you being split, fractured, divided against yourself. But perhaps the most profound change is this. You'll stop being afraid of yourself. You'll stop treating your own thoughts and feelings like dangerous enemies that need to be controlled, suppressed, or managed. You'll develop a kind of friendly curiosity about your own inner landscape. You'll be able to sit with discomfort without immediately reaching for a distraction. You'll be able to feel your feelings without drowning in them. This is the quiet strength, not the absence of fear or doubt or pain, but the ability to be with what is without needing it to be different. The capacity to stand in uncertainty without collapsing into it. The wisdom to know that you are not your thoughts, your feelings, your circumstances, or your history. You are the awareness in which all of these things arise and pass away. And from this place, from this ground of being, you can make real choices. Not reactive choices driven by fear or need or conditioning, but conscious choices rooted in your actual values, your actual desires, your actual truth. You can say yes to what serves you and no to what doesn't without guilt or apology or elaborate justification. The crowd needs justification. The crowd needs everyone to agree. The crowd needs consensus before it can move. But you just need to know what's true for you. And then you need the courage to honor that truth, regardless of who understands or approves. So here we are. You've heard the invitation. You felt the resonance or the resistance, or maybe both. And now you're standing at a threshold, wondering if you have what it takes to cross it. Let me ease your mind. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need a 5-year plan or a clear destination or a roadmap to your authentic self. You just need to take the next honest step. Just one. The path doesn't reveal itself all at once. It reveals itself step by step, choice by choice, moment by moment. Maybe the next honest step is admitting that you're not happy, that the life you're living doesn't fit anymore, if it ever did. Maybe it's having a conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe it's making a change you've been postponing. Maybe it's simply sitting in silence and asking yourself what you actually want. Not what you think you should want, but what you actually want, and then listening. Really listening to the answer that comes. The quiet strength of those who walk their own path isn't something you acquire. It's something you uncover. It's been there all along, buried under layers of conditioning and fear and performance. You don't need to become someone different. You need to stop being someone you're not. You need to peel away the false and let what's real emerge. And yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. Change always is. Growth always is. Truth always is. But discomfort isn't the same as damage. Discomfort is just unfamiliar. And the unfamiliar becomes familiar with time and practice and patience. You've been walking someone else's path for so long that you've forgotten what your own footsteps feel like. You've been wearing someone else's clothes for so long that you've forgotten what your own skin feels like. You've been speaking someone else's words for so long that you've forgotten the sound of your own voice. But it's still there. That voice, that self, that path, waiting for you. Not with judgment or impatience, but with infinite compassion and infinite patience. Because it knows something you're just beginning to remember. You can't actually lose yourself. You can only forget yourself. And what's been forgotten can be remembered. The world needs people who have stopped pretending, who have stopped performing, who have stopped seeking approval for their existence. Not because we need more rebels or contrarians or difficult people, but because we need more humans, real humans, whole humans, humans who know themselves and like themselves and can show up in the world as themselves without apology or pretense. This is your invitation, not to become someone extraordinary, but to be ordinarily yourself, magnificently, courageously, quietly yourself. To walk your own path, not because it makes you special, but because it makes you real. And real is what we've all been searching for all along. So take the step, the next honest step, and then the next, and then the next. Not because you know where you're going, but because you trust that your own path, however uncertain, is better than someone else's certainty. Because you understand that the quiet strength you've been admiring in others was never theirs to begin with. It was always yours. You just needed permission to claim it. And here's your permission. You're allowed to be yourself. You're allowed to want what you want. You're allowed to walk away from what doesn't serve you. You're allowed to disappoint people who expect you to remain small. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to grow. You're allowed to be free. The path is yours. It always has been. Welcome home.